You open your eyes, not to the warm glow of sunrise, but to the gray-blue haze of another Roman morning. There's no window, just a jagged hole in the wall where light seeps through like a whisper, carrying the scent of dust, smoke, and sometimes the soft coo of a wayward pigeon. You lie in a room no bigger than a closet, carved into the upper floor of a crumbling insula, Rome's version of a crowded tenement. The higher the floor, the poorer the tenant. And tonight you're quite high up. The stone walls around you are cold in winter and slick with sweat in summer. The floor creaks, the ceiling threatens, and the air feels stale even before you've moved. The mattress beneath you is little more than straw, crackling with every shift, possibly alive with small, unseen residents. Your blanket smells of damp wool, faded time, and shared hardship. There's no furniture, no decorations, and certainly no kitchen. You own a clay cup, a worn tunic, and maybe, just maybe, a wooden comb if luck found you yesterday. At the corner of your tiny space sits a clay pot. Your chamber pot. Silent, full, and disapproving. Soon, you'll have to take it downstairs, avoiding crooked steps and sleepy neighbors, hoping you don't slip and add your name to Rome's growing list of accidental sacrifices. The walls are paper thin. You hear your neighbor praying softly, coughing heavily, arguing with his wife, and unfortunately, not arguing too. The building breathes as one giant, weary beast. You can feel its sighs in the floor, hear its dreams in the pipes, and smell its regrets in every corner. Someone is baking bread on the lower floor. You can smell the crust turning golden. But it's not for you. That warmth belongs to the early risers with coin to spare. Outside, a vendor yells about figs and fish scraps. Somewhere nearby, a soldier is shouting. Someone is likely already bleeding. You're not even out the door yet, and your skin itches, your back aches, and there's a metallic taste in the air, perhaps from the lead pipes that run beneath your street. Still, the day has begun, and Rome does not wait for the weary. You're not Caesar. No crown, no bath of marble. You're just another soul trying not to fall down the stairs or offend a minor city god before noon. And you've still got 23 hours to go. You grip the chamber pot and descend the warped staircase. Your feet echo with each step, a hollow rhythm of survival. At the bottom, you shuffle into the street, the clay pot in one hand, modesty in the other, heading toward the nearest public latrine. Rome's restrooms, latrini, are not places of privacy. They are long stone benches with round holes, lined over shallow channels of running water. Water not clean, but determined. You sit, if you must, beside strangers who speak of grain prices, leg pain, or politics. A man across from you eats olives without blinking. You look away. There are no doors, no dividers. Only shared air, shared silence, and shared shame. Then comes the sponge. The tersorium. A communal sponge on a stick, resting in a bucket of vinegar or salt water. The theory is, rinse before use. The reality, hope for the best. You hesitate, then wipe, feeling history, humanity, and vinegar sting all at once. There is no soap, no running water, no towel. Only a basin where countless fingers have passed, dipping in and out like memories. You rinse your hands and walk away, not cleaner, not changed, but somehow more Roman. Rome is awake. And so are you. One morning survived. One breath at a time. You've managed the descent, a small triumph in a world built of shadows and uncertainty. Now, there's another pressing task, your bladder. There's no bathroom, of course. No porcelain bowl, no gentle flush, no soft towel. Just you, your clay chamber pot, and the quiet knowledge that comfort is a concept reserved for gods and senators. You step outside, where dawn is still stretching, golden and gray. Your bare feet touch the cobbled road, still cool from night. The street hums with life. Not bustle, just the low, ongoing breath of a city that never truly sleeps. Chickens stir in the alley. Somewhere, a dog sniffs the corner of a cart. Above, laundry flutters in defiance of the grime below. You walk slowly, chamber pot in one hand, modesty in the other, toward the nearest public latrine, Rome's answer to privacy. An open bench, a trickle of water, and far too many strangers. The latrina is not hidden. It welcomes you with the scent of humanity, the murmur of morning conversation, and the distinct feeling of shared surrender. The bench is stone, cold, and worn smooth by generations of use. Holes cut evenly along its length, like punctuation marks on a very intimate sentence. You find a space. You sit cautiously, careful not to glance across. The man beside you is humming. The one on the other side sighs loudly and begins to talk about chariot taxes. There are no doors. No partitions. Just people. Some greet one another like old friends. Others pretend they are alone in a field of silence. You try to fall into that latter group. It's difficult. The man across from you pops olives into his mouth and never breaks eye contact. You wait. You try to remember something gentle, the sound of leaves and wind, the warmth of baked clay, the lull of a quiet market before noon. Then, the worst moment arrives. The tersorium. A communal sponge, fixed to a stick, sitting patiently in a pot of vinegar. You reach for it with a quiet dread. The theory is to rinse it before use. The reality is layered. You do what needs to be done, and in doing so, join an unspoken brotherhood of necessity. It burns. It humbles. It passes. There is no soap. No fresh towel. Just a basin near the entrance where dozens of hands have dipped before you. You rinse yours briefly, watching the ripples vanish into stillness. As you exit the latrine, the sun is higher. Rome is louder. The bakers are shouting, children are running, and pigeons circle above, their wings flashing silver in the light. You feel changed, not by cleanliness, but by acceptance. This is your life. Not a nightmare. Not a punishment. Just a morning, like many before and many to come. A quiet rhythm of ritual and resistance. You pass a fountain where a woman scrubs clothes against the stone. She hums, a melody older than empire. A boy runs barefoot, chasing a hoop. Two elders lean on a step and argue over the weather like it's a matter of law. And in that soft chaos, there's something peaceful. Because here, in the belly of ancient Rome, nobody pretends. The city shows you its cracks, its dust, its truth. And you, still breathing, still standing, are part of it. You look up. The insula towers above you like a tired old tree. You've left your chamber pot behind. Your hands still damp. Your stomach beginning to whisper for food. But there's time. One step at a time. One breath. One crumb. The day will unfold as it always does, with struggle, with noise, with moments of quiet grace tucked between the grime. And so, with nothing in your pockets and dust in your throat, you begin to walk toward the next piece of survival, breakfast. You've survived the first test of the day. Now comes another, softer but no less sobering, breakfast. In modern times, we speak of breakfast with affection, warm toast, hot drinks, the comfort of routine. But here, in ancient Rome, breakfast is not joy. It is simply a beginning. Nothing more, nothing less. You walk to the corner of your street, where others like you gather. No one speaks much. The morning sun creeps between the buildings, slow and dusty, as if unsure it wants to return. You squat near a fountain, its water just clean enough not to question. Around you, figures in faded tunics tear bread with tired fingers. Your meal is panis rusticus, a hard, stale loaf baked yesterday, or perhaps the day before. The crust is sharp, the inside dense, as if it were made of pebbles and flour. You chew slowly, carefully. The bread gives reluctantly, like old rope unraveling. Beside you, someone pours a splash of wine into a clay cup. It's thin, diluted, more water than grape. But that's the point. Wine here is not luxury. It's safety. The water alone is risky, carrying with it the whispers of sewers and forgotten pipes. The wine helps, perhaps. Or maybe it just numbs. You look at your breakfast, a hunk of bread and a cup of thin wine. If you are lucky, maybe a piece of cheese, sharp and crumbling. Perhaps a smear of garum, Rome's infamous fermented fish sauce, salty, pungent, unforgettable. You hesitate. You eat it anyway. You need strength, even if it comes cloaked in bitterness. A vendor passes by, balancing a tray of chickpea fritters. The scent of hot oil and spice fills the air, momentarily lifting your spirits. But your coin pouch is empty. You look away. You tear another piece of bread and chew. Slowly. Always slowly. Others around you do the same. A mother feeds her child with pieces softened in wine. An old man mutters to himself between bites. A dog waits, tail still, watching for crumbs. You sit in silence with them, part of an ancient rhythm. No plates, no forks, no ceremony. Just hunger, and the brief quiet that follows its first easing. Above, the day stretches long and endless. Work awaits. Your stomach is half full, your body already tired. But you rise. Because that's what Rome requires. Not joy. Not celebration. Only that you continue. With the bread gone and the sun climbing, it's time to move. Time to step into the labor that sustains this sprawling empire of stone, sweat, and silent struggle. The Roman workday does not wait. It starts early. It starts always. You pass carts being loaded, sandals scuffing against uneven stone. A man calls out orders in a voice hoarse with habit. You nod politely. You do not answer. You save your voice for grunts, for gasps, for the silence between one burden and the next. Today, you might carry bricks, or sweep a temple floor, or dig a trench for a bathhouse that will never welcome you. If your luck is poor, you might work near the sewers, dark veins beneath the city where breath comes slow and curses echo. Your tools are basic, a splintered shovel, a chipped trowel, the strength of your spine. No gloves, no protection. Just the weight of work and the hope your hands do not fail you. If you're a craftsman, you join the others in the market stalls, displaying pots, sandals, or tunics, each nearly identical to the next. Your price is too high for some, too low for others. Quality means little if your face displeases someone richer. Even educated jobs offer no comfort. If you're a messenger, you run, scrolls clutched in hand, dodging carts and dogs. If you're a teacher, you plead for attention from boys who believe they are already gods. Your words are swallowed by their laughter. Women work, too. They weave, they sew, they sell fruit beneath woven tents. They raise children, tend fires, manage water, patch holes, both in fabric and in life. Their work is endless. Their value, often silent. And yet, there is something sacred in it all. Something steady. Not glorious, but honest. Rome was not built in a day, but it is rebuilt each morning by hands like yours. You wipe your brow. Dust falls like petals. You do not rest long. There is no lunch break written in law. Only a few minutes, perhaps, to chew more bread in shade if it can be found. And when the foreman looks away, when the sun rests briefly behind a rooftop, you breathe. Not deeply. Just enough. And then, again, you lift, you pull, you move. Because the city must stand. And you must eat. You step back into the light. If light is what you can call the slow, dusty haze that filters between stone buildings, where sun and shadow chase each other like cats through alleys. The street greets you not with ceremony, but with sensation. It buzzes, groans, mutters. Life here does not walk. It ripples, shuffles, spills over. Your sandals scuff the cobbles worn smooth by centuries of feet. The road beneath you is ancient, purposeful, built with care, and yet still full of cracks and secrets. Between raised walkways, a shallow groove runs down the center, meant to carry water and waste away from the heart of the city. In reality, it carries much more: discarded food, old wine, forgotten dreams. The smell is layered. Smoke from cooking fires, brine from fish wrapped in cloth, spice from distant lands, but also urine, mildew, and the musty perfume of thousands who have not bathed in days. You breathe shallowly, learning to find the air that lives just above the rot. Vendors call out in sing-song tones. Figs, garum, goat cheese. A boy runs past with stolen dates. No one chases him. A musician strums a lyre beneath a tattered awning, his notes soft and out of tune, but not unkind. You pause at a fountain, one of the many scattered across Rome like blessings from a forgotten god. The water flows endlessly, pulled from faraway hills by aqueducts that defy time. You watch it ripple in the basin, its surface dancing with reflections of clouds and pigeons. People come and go. A woman dips her jug. A child splashes his hands. A man washes his feet with the weary dignity of someone who has done this 100 times. You resist the urge to drink. You've learned enough not to trust what looks pure. You walk on. Past open doorways where bakers fan their ovens. Past shuttered windows hiding sleeping elders. Past temples with incense trailing like breath. The noise rises and falls in waves, hoofbeats, bells, a distant shout. A dog barks. A cart groans. Every corner holds a story. A woman shouting about her missing sandals. Two men haggling over the price of pickled onions. A beggar whispering prayers to no one in particular. Rome contains all of it: the beauty, the pain, the laughter, the stink. At times you feel invisible. At other times, too visible. I scan you. Not in judgment, but in acknowledgement. You are one of them. A thread in the vast, tangled fabric. You catch sight of the Colosseum far off in the haze. Its arches frame the sky like ribs of a sleeping beast. You won't go there today. But its presence reminds you, the city feeds on spectacle. It thrives on movement. You stop again, briefly, beneath a fig tree trying its best to grow from a crack in the masonry. Its shadow is small, but welcome. You sit, back against the warm stone, and let your muscles sigh. Children pass, chasing a wooden hoop. A man leads a goat with ribbons tied to its horns. A vendor naps behind his stall. In that moment, Rome softens. The noise becomes lullaby. The heat becomes blanket. And for the first time since dawn, you close your eyes. Only for a breath. Only long enough to remember, this city may be harsh, but it is real. Alive. It demands much. But it also gives, if only in crumbs and shade. You rise quietly. The stone is warm where you sat. The fig leaves rustle above like an old lullaby. And as you step back into the current of life, you are not stronger, but somehow steadier. Because you know its rhythm now. The sun stands tall above Rome now. Shadows shrink, and the city sweats under the weight of its own movement. Your limbs grow heavier with every step. Each task leaves a faint ache. Each errand takes a little more from you than it gives. And beneath all of it lies a truth rarely spoken aloud. In this ancient world, pain is not a visitor. It is a resident. You stub your toe, there is no ice, no balm. You grit your teeth, and carry on. You lift a crate the wrong way, Something tugs in your back. You stretch. You mutter. You hope it goes away. It doesn't. Here, discomfort is not a sign that something is wrong. It's a reminder that you're alive, and still expected to keep going. If your hand swells from a bee sting, you rub vinegar and hope. If your eye reddens, someone might suggest goat's milk or burnt onion ash. And if the pain deepens, into fever, infection, trembling, your options narrow to silence, herbal smoke, or the steady march toward the inevitable. There are no anesthetics. No antiseptics. If you're fortunate, there may be honey to dress a wound. If you're less fortunate, there's a chant whispered by a nervous midwife, or a neighbor who swears he can fix dislocated joints because he saw someone else do it once. A broken arm is bound with wood and cloth. A rotting tooth is yanked, if you're lucky, with something dull and shaking hands. Imagine the tools of a blacksmith used not on iron, but in your mouth. That's the scene. And yet, it's called healing. For those born into wealth, pain is polished into philosophy. Stoicism teaches endurance without complaint. A nobleman who limps is applauded for his resolve. A woman who weeps is told to look away. Suffering becomes proof of character. For those without coin, pain is just pain. And often, no one notices. You could be bleeding in the street, and the only words you'll hear are "don't stain the mosaic." You remember a boy once, quiet, pale, with a fever that burned through 3 nights. They tried everything: herbs, prayers, cold cloth, honey, smoke. But on the 4th morning, only silence remained. His name was whispered once, then folded into the noise of the city. Even childbirth, the passage between life and life, is lined with risk. Women crouch on straw mats, gripping whatever hand or cloth is near. The midwife hums. She may have delivered 5 children or 50. But each one is different, and the gods are fickle. Sometimes the mother survives. Sometimes the child. Sometimes either. And yet, Rome keeps moving. The temples stay open. The markets remain loud. The city doesn't pause for grief. It swallows it, the way it swallows everything else, with smoke, dust, and unending footsteps. You walk past a street healer today. He has a table of jars, garlic, leeches, powdered bone, dried herbs with names whispered like spells. People stop. Some buy. Others scoff. No one lingers long. Healing in this world is not science. It is art. It is myth. It is trust offered with trembling hands. And often it fails. Still you keep walking. Your back sore. Your legs slow. But you are still here. Still breathing the heavy air. Still chasing the next task, the next bite, the next moment of stillness. Pain, in ancient Rome, is not a punishment. It is a companion. And tonight, when you lie again on your straw mattress, when the ache in your feet settles deep into your bones, you will not think of doctors. You will think of the sky, the stars, the quiet hush between one cough and the next. And you will sleep. Not deeply, but enough. After a long day under the Roman sun, your body is a worn instrument, strings loosened, skin coated in dust and sweat. Your limbs have bent, lifted, hauled, and endured. Now, as the sky begins to soften into gold and violet, a new voice rises from within: hunger. Familiar, patient, undeniable. Dinner calls, not as a feast, but as a ritual. In Latin, they call it cena, the main meal. But don't imagine abundance. This is no banquet. You are not reclining on cushions, sipping wine beside sculpted fountains. You are standing near a shared hearth or a cramped alley stove, with a bowl and hope. Let's begin with what you won't find. No pizza. No pasta. No tomatoes, for they have not crossed the ocean yet. No potatoes. No chocolate. No sugar. And certainly, no coffee. None of these exist in your world. Instead, you have porridge, pulse, the food of the humble. Ground grain simmered in water, stirred until thick, seasoned with whatever can be spared. Sometimes herbs, sometimes oil. If fortune favors you, perhaps a shred of meat. But more often, it's vegetables, onions, leeks, chickpeas if you're lucky. The smell is earthy, grounding. A reminder that food here is not about delight. It is about survival. A full belly means strength for tomorrow. You sit on a stone step, or a wooden crate, or a patch of warm earth. Around you, others do the same. Eating is not solitary in Rome. It is noisy. It is shared. Children chase each other between bowls. A woman sings softly as she ladles stew. A man gnaws at a crust of bread with a tooth already loose. Sometimes there's garum, the fermented fish sauce that clings to the air like a ghost. Salty, sharp, it turns anything into food, or at least into something edible. You try not to inhale too deeply. But it's part of the flavor of Rome. You dip your bread in oil, feeling the rough edges soften. You chew slowly. Let the warmth rise. Let the salt remind you that you are still here, still whole. There is wine, too, weak, thinned with water, not meant for celebration, but for health. It keeps the illness from water at bay. You sip it carefully. Let it wash away the dust of your day. Stories flow around you like rivers. A neighbor tells of a runaway ox. A boy boasts of a rat he chased with a broom. An elder grumbles about taxes and missing sandals. No one is quiet, but no one shouts. The light fades. Oil lamps flicker to life, dotting the walls and windows with little amber stars. The sky darkens from lavender to navy. Crickets begin their song, humble musicians in the corners of stone and shadow. You lean back. The bowl empty. Your hunger softened. Your hands warm from holding food. There's no dessert. But there is quiet. There is rest. And even though your tunic is patched, your sandals worn, your stomach not quite full, still, you feel a moment of peace. Rome is not generous, but it gives these moments. If you listen closely, you'll hear them between spoonfuls, between footsteps, between breaths. Dinner in ancient Rome is not a celebration. It is a conversation with the day. A pause. A breath. A promise that tomorrow, perhaps, you will eat again. And so you sit a little longer in the dark, letting the food settle, letting your body remember softness. The stars bloom overhead. The lamps sway in breeze. Someone hums a tune that has no name. You close your eyes, not to sleep just yet, but to feel the quiet. And in that quiet, you find something rare. Enough. The sky deepens, shading from dusk to early night, but the city is far from silent. Rome does not sleep easily. It rustles, murmurs, stretches its limbs in stone and firelight. For those with a few coins, or luck, there is evening entertainment. And even for those without, the noise reaches every alley. You walk with others toward the arena, not because you must, but because it's what people do. Spectacle is Rome's most loyal offering. Tonight, the crowd is already gathering, drawn by rumor, hunger, or habit. The amphitheater looms ahead like the open jaws of a creature long awake, its arches lit with torchlight, its steps worn smooth by generations of footsteps. Inside, the atmosphere hums. There are no hushed voices here. The roar of excitement trembles in the stone. You sit where you can, far from the dignitaries in their bright robes, closer to the workers, the laborers, the ones who laugh loudest and clap hardest. The sand in the center glows under flickering lamps. You watch as a man enters, bare-chested, weapon in hand, body scarred like an old map. Across from him, another emerges. They circle. The crowd rises. You feel yourself rise, too, not in body, but in something older, something primal. Then a clash. A shout. A gasp. Metal strikes metal. Blood darkens the sand. A limb is lost. Someone cheers. You are not sure why. This is not cruelty. Not only. It is ceremony. It is a performance of strength, of courage, of finality. And though your stomach turns, your hands still clap. Because that is what Rome expects. And what Rome expects, it receives. But if this is not for you, if your soul leans toward quiet rather than chaos, you may choose the theater instead. Down a quieter path, past bakeries closing for the night, stands the amphitheatrum, where actors take the stage instead of soldiers. You slip inside. The air here is different, perfumed with incense and damp wood. The audience is smaller, softer. The light is warmer. The play has begun. It is a tragedy, written in Latin that twists and turns like ivy. You catch only pieces of it, but it is enough. A daughter's sorrow. A father's curse. A moment of silence so deep it feels holy. The actors wear masks. Their gestures are grand. A woman wails with such feeling, the hairs on your arms rise. Then, a man enters with a comic flourish. A joke. Laughter rolls like waves. You do not catch the punchline, but you smile anyway. The performance ends. Applause like rain. You step out beneath the stars. Somewhere across the city, the arena still rages. But here, the night is gentler. People speak in low tones. Couples walk slowly. A flute plays in the distance. You walk homeward, body tired but spirit steadier. Rome has shown you both faces, the one that screams, and the one that sings. And now, as you return to your insula, climbing again those creaking steps, you think not of blood or sand or masks. You think of the stars. Of the play's last line. Of how, for a moment, you forgot the dust on your feet and the ache in your hands. In this city that demands so much, even a single breath of beauty is a treasure. And tonight you carry that treasure with you into sleep. Evening deepens, and the streets grow cooler, but not quieter. In Rome, danger walks beside you, wearing the same sandals, speaking the same language. It moves in shadows and open markets alike. And while the temples promise justice, it is the law of the empire that truly rules the night. Justice here is not blind. It stares straight at you, with the hard eyes of marble statues and the harsher eyes of men with scrolls and authority. Law is written, carved, and whispered. But it is also performed, on streets, in courts, and before crowds eager to see punishment unfold. If you are accused of theft or rebellion, or merely happen to be poor and inconvenient, you might find yourself judged not by your actions, but by your station. Punishment is rarely subtle. Crucifixion is not rare, nor sacred. It is not reserved for messiahs or martyrs. It is the standard answer to rebellion, theft, disrespect. It is long. It is slow. It is deliberate. A message written in flesh and silence. You have likely passed one on your way to the market, or seen one raised in the field outside the wall. You may have looked away. Or not. The city has lawmen, the vigiles, Rome's version of firefighters, watchmen, and night guards. But do not mistake them for guardians. They are underpaid, overworked, and often willing to look away for the right price. If you are robbed, they may shrug. If you are injured, they may ask for coin before helping. Sometimes they're the ones you must hide from. Disputes are common. Arguments over debts, land, words spoken in heat. Sometimes they're settled by a magistrate. Other times by fists. If you're lucky, a local elder intervenes. If not, the shouting turns to bleeding, and the bleeding becomes memory. You remember seeing a man once, bound to a post, beaten in the square. Not with rage, but with ritual. The crowd watched, not angry, not joyful. Just present. The man made no sound. Not from strength. From understanding. He knew this was the script. There is a court, of course. A place of togas and long speeches, where lawyers twist truth like vines. If you are rich, you hire the best. If not, you speak for yourself. Words are weapons here. But the sharpest blade is still wealth. Even rumors can be deadly. A whisper in the wrong ear. A look misunderstood. A neighbor with envy. You live carefully, not only with what you do, but with how you are seen. Still, justice sometimes comes. A landlord is fined for collapsing stairs. A soldier is punished for theft. A senator loses favor and finds himself exiled to a quiet island. Rome remembers. But it also forgets quickly. And yet, amid the harshness, there are strange moments of balance. A widow is granted her late husband's land. A child taken in by neighbors after tragedy. A merchant pardoned for defending his stall. The law may be hard, but people, sometimes, are soft. Sometimes. And so, you walk carefully at night. You speak gently. You lower your gaze when needed. Not from fear, but from survival. Because here, in the heart of the empire, even justice wears a mask. You reach your insula again. The stairs creak as they always do. You pass a man whispering a prayer before entering his door. Perhaps for safety. Perhaps for forgiveness. You lie down. Your body sore. Your mind busy. Somewhere, justice is being written. Somewhere, it is being erased. You pull your blanket close. You have done nothing wrong. But that is not always enough. Still, for now you are free. And in the quiet of this moment, that is everything. You may have made it through the work, the noise, the dust, the rituals of food and fear. But one challenge never rests. Not by night, not by dawn. It is the silent weight that presses on every step, every word, Rome's social hierarchy. Imagine a ladder. Not wooden, not rope. A ladder built from marble, gilded in silver, but slick with oil and lined with blades. That is Roman society. Beautiful to behold. Deadly to climb. At its peak stand the senators, men wrapped in flowing togas with purple stripes, their fingers heavy with rings, their estates stretching far beyond the horizon. These are the ones whose names echo in temples, whose decisions ripple across markets and alleyways alike. They don't walk through Rome. They glide. Or are carried. Beneath them, but still shining, are the equestrians, not warriors necessarily, but men of wealth and contracts, powerful in trade and influence. Their tunics are finer, their sandals clean. They speak less, but are heard more. Then come the plebeians, the working citizens. Craftsmen, soldiers, bakers, teachers. Some with homes, some with hope. This is where you might live, somewhere between hunger and pride, between dreams and fatigue. You pay your taxes, salute the statues, and keep your head low when needed. Below that line lie the freedmen, once enslaved, now liberated, but never quite equal. Their freedom is real, but bounded. Their path forward is paved with reminders of where they began. And at the base, the enslaved. Not just field hands or laborers, but tutors, scribes, even physicians. They live among marble and shadow, owned not only by people, but by the system itself. They are punished not only for defiance, but for ambition. And yet this ladder is not still. It trembles. It creaks. Sometimes someone climbs. A soldier gains glory. A freedman earns enough to buy respect. A baker's son learns letters, earns favor, enters office. But the ladder remembers. It forgives slowly. It punishes quickly. Every detail matters. the cut of your cloak, the quality of your Latin, the name you carry, or lack. A misplaced gesture can mark you as impolite. A misused title can brand you ignorant. Even the way you tie your sandals might be noticed. You learn to observe, to mimic, to listen more than you speak, not out of shame, but strategy. In Rome, you do not just live. You perform. You recall a friend once, born low, climbed higher. He smiled too much at the wrong banquet, spoke too freely. The next day, the contracts dried up. The whispers returned. He still walks the streets, but slower now. Quieter. The city noticed his ambition and reminded him of his place. But still, people try. Because to rise, even one step, is to breathe easier, sleep softer, walk safer. The climb is perilous, yes. But staying still is its own kind of fall. And so, each day, you choose your words like coins. You greet your neighbors carefully. You fold your tunic with precision. You bow deeper to the right people, and nod more casually to others. Not out of fear, but out of practice. Because survival in Rome isn't just about food or shelter. It's about knowing who you are allowed to be, and who you are willing to become. And as night settles deeper, as the city groans in its sleep, you rest not only your body, but your mask. You've worn it well today. Tomorrow, you'll wear it again. Night in Rome does not arrive gently. It creeps in through narrow alleys and across tiled rooftops, cloaked in the scent of oil, smoke, and weary breath. The heat of the day still lingers on the stones, but the light has faded, replaced by flickering lamps and soft murmurs. You are walking home, slowly, cautiously. Not because you're tired, though you are, but because Rome at night is a different city. The rules shift with the moon. Streets once filled with vendors and children now seem longer, emptier, sharper at the edges. You pass a man in shadow, leaning just far enough to suggest disinterest, yet watching. You keep walking. Not too fast. Not too slow. Because in the darkness, almost anyone can be a target. Wealth doesn't protect you. Manners don't matter. Unless you carry a blade, or walk with a group, or disappear entirely, you're vulnerable. The vigiles patrol some districts, their torches bobbing like fireflies. But they are few, and they cannot be everywhere. Even they know that some corners of the city belong to the shadows, not to law. And then, there is fire, Rome's most ancient fear. The insulae, those tall, narrow buildings that house most of the city's poor, are fragile things. Built of wood and clay, patched with hope and dry straw. A spark from a careless lantern. A cooking flame left unchecked. A single ember drifting on the night wind. That's all it takes. The city knows this. Which is why cooking after dark is forbidden by law. But hunger does not always honor laws. A desperate family heats soup in secret. A drunk knocks over a lamp. Somewhere, far off, a dog begins to bark. You've seen fire before. Once, in the next district, the sky turned orange and screams cut the air. People poured buckets from windows. Some threw belongings, others jumped. In the end, ash floated down like gray snow, and by morning, the building was gone. You walk past one of those ruins now, its frame blackened, walls collapsed inward like folded cloth. A child plays beside it, stacking rocks as if building it back again. Even in the quiet districts, fear lingers. You notice how carefully your neighbors trim their lamps. How the old woman across from you always keeps a bucket near the stairs. How some people sleep with sandals on, just in case. Inside your own room, the air is dense. The oil lamp burns low. You check the walls, the ones that creak when the wind changes. You look at the ceiling, wondering how long the wood above can hold. You lie on your mattress, but you do not sleep just yet. You listen. to footsteps fading down the stairwell, to the drip of a leaky pipe, to the hush of distant voices, to silence, broken only by the occasional crackle of a lamp, or the flutter of wings brushing past your open window. And still you stay. Not from bravery, but from belonging. Because even danger becomes familiar when it sings the same song each night. Rome sleeps in pieces, some restless, some deep. It is a city of echoes and embers, of dreams wrapped in smoke, of lives stacked like firewood, warm and waiting. You roll to your side, pull your blanket higher, and close your eyes, not because it is safe, but because it is time. And outside, Rome breathes. You lie in the dark, wrapped in a blanket that barely holds warmth, pressed between four walls that breathe louder than you do. The lamp has long gone out. The coals in the brazier faded to whispers. Yet sleep does not come. Not easily. Not here. Your insula, tall and trembling, creaks like an old ship in slow collapse. The beams groan with the shifting weight of those above. You wonder, only briefly, if tonight will be the night the ceiling gives way. But then the thought drifts off, swallowed by more immediate concerns. Rats skitter through the walls. You hear their tiny feet like drumming fingertips, their bodies slipping between cracks with a confidence earned from centuries of survival. They own this building as much as you do. Maybe more. Your neighbor coughs. A deep, rattling sound that seems to come from inside the stone. He coughs again. A pause. Then silence. You do not know his name, but you know his breath. You know the rhythm of his restless nights. A woman laughs, sharp and sudden, somewhere down the hall. The sound turns into shouting. Then something slams. Then nothing. For a moment, you wonder whether it was joy, fury, or both. And in Rome, it could be either. Or neither. And so you wait. The pillow beneath your head is damp. With sweat. With time. You turn it over. It's no better. You close your eyes and murmur a prayer to Mercury, not for wealth or travel, but for silence. For stillness. But there is no silence in Rome. The city murmurs even now. The stones hold the day's noise like heat. You hear sandals in the alley. A cart rolling somewhere far away. The distant cry of someone drunk or desperate. A dog barking at nothing. Or everything. Above, someone turns in their sleep. Below, a pod is dropped. Across the courtyard, a baby wails into the void, and a tired voice soothes it with a song that floats softly through the night air. You shift. You breathe. You press your hands against your chest, as if trying to hold yourself still from the inside out. This is the price of living here, not just the heat, or the hunger, or the toil, but the constant company of others. Even in darkness, you are never alone. Not truly. There are footsteps. Whispers. Breaths. Rome sleeps like a creature with too many heads, some snoring, some singing, some always watching. Still, there are moments. A breeze finds its way through the wall crack. It brushes your face like a kindness from the gods. You inhale. It smells of rosemary. Of burned oil. Of something almost like the sea. You think briefly of fields. Of open space. Of nights where stars fill the sky instead of smoke. You wonder if such a place still exists. Or if Rome has swallowed it, as it swallows everything. But you are tired. So tired. And somehow, without noticing, your thoughts drift. They stretch like vines toward dream. Your breath slows. Your limbs grow heavy. The rats still dance. The walls still moan. But their music no longer bothers you. Because this, too, is Rome. A city of struggle. Of noise. Of light. But also a city of rest, when rest finally wins. And as your eyes finally close, as sleep reaches up to meet you like a soft, invisible hand, you understand the truth that no senator can buy, no soldier can force, no builder can carve. Peace, here, is not the absence of noise. It is the moment when you stop fighting it, and let it carry you home. Beyond the bustling forums and the disciplined legions, far from the marble steps of the Roman Senate, there are other stories. Stories carved not in Latin, but in grit and silence. Tonight, as Rome exhales in sleep, we drift far east, into the realm of Parthia. Into a life ruled not by Caesar, but by a woman named Rhodogun. Rhodogun was not born into soft silks or polished banquets. She was born into wind and dust, into hooves and armor. Her home was a palace, yes, but one that echoed more with war cries than poetry. Her world was a borderland where peace was never promised, and power was taken, not gifted. Her father, Mithridates II, was no idle king. He forged an empire from scattered tribes and ancient cities. Under his reign, Parthia rose from forgotten sands to stand toe-to-toe with mighty Rome. But when he died, his legacy fractured. The throne trembled. Factions stirred. And in the heart of this unrest stood Rhodogun. She was not trained for rule. She was not raised for battle. But she listened. She learned. And when whispers of rebellion cracked through the corridors, she did not run. She stepped forward. The palace, lit by flickering oil, held meetings long past midnight. Courtiers in fine robes argued with generals in dust-covered armor. Outside the gates, the hills burned with torchlight, and riders disappeared into the dark. Inside, Rhodogun watched. Not just as a princess, but as something sharper. She walked the stone halls barefoot, silent as a memory, hearing things not meant for her ears. And when the morning came, her voice cut through the debate like a sword. She would not wait. She would not hide behind tradition. And though she was not crowned, and not beloved by all, the soldiers began to look at her differently. Not as a figurehead, but as a leader. Rome never saw her rise. Their scrolls barely record her name. But in the east, among the broken mountain passes and thorn borders, the legend of a daughter who dared to command would begin to grow. A fire, quiet at first, then roaring. Sometimes leadership is declared with trumpets, other times with silence. Rhodogun did neither. She made her vow not in a golden hall, but on horseback, beneath a sky thick with coming storm. She dressed not in silks, but in armor, worn, functional, cold against the skin. Her hair, once combed by handmaidens, now knotted with wind. And there, in front of the soldiers, farmers, and rebels alike, she made a promise. She would not wash. She would not brush her hair. She would not adorn herself in comfort or care, not until the rebellion was broken. It was not a decree. It was a challenge. And it echoed through the ranks like a battle cry whispered through every tent. Men spoke of it in low voices over fires. Women repeated it in back alleys and palace kitchens. The vow did not make her divine. It made her real, tangible, one of them. Touched by the same dirt and hunger, she rode into battle not as a queen, but as a commander. Her voice hoarse, her hands blistered. When wounds needed cleaning, she helped. When arrows rained down, she raised her shield. When grief fell heavy, she remained upright, braids stiff with dust, armor stained. And slowly, the tide began to turn. Each village reclaimed, each hill defended, added weight to her promise. Her hair became legend, tangled with rebellion, streaked with ash. A symbol of resistance and resolve. Rome, distant and busy with its own conquests, paid little attention. But inside the Parthian lines, her name bloomed like smoke on cold mornings. Not with fanfare, but with respect. One soldier said, "She doesn't need a crown. She wears our hunger. Another said, she doesn't break. So we won't. And eventually, the rebellion fell. Not all at once. Not with a final clash. But piece by piece. Worn down by unity more than by blade. When peace returned, she did not celebrate. Instead, she walked into a river. Alone. The water rose around her as she combed through the knots, one by one. Slowly. Carefully. As if untangling the grief of an entire nation. She emerged not as royalty, but as memory. And somewhere in the hills, near the border where Rome's maps faded into guessing, someone whispered her name into the wind, softly, reverently. Rhodogun. There was no spell. No prophecy. No glowing sword drawn from sacred stone. Rhodogun's strength came not from divine intervention, but from something far older, discipline. That quiet, unrelenting force that shapes days into destiny. The kind of strength built from early mornings, from tired muscles, from promises kept long after they stopped being convenient. By the time her army approached the final rebel stronghold, a crumbling fortress nestled high among bone-colored cliffs, her legend had outgrown her name. In taverns and temples, soldiers whispered that the enemy feared not the spears, not the cavalry, not even the gods. What they feared was Rhodogun's vow, that she might never wash again. That her hair, wild and woven with the war itself, had become more cursed than crown. They joked about it, but not without reverence, because by then, her appearance had changed. Her eyes darker, sharper, her voice steadier. The braids in her hair now heavy with ash, dirt, and time. She was no longer just a leader. She was a living oath. A walking storm of memory and momentum. The siege itself was slow, purposeful. Not a battle of swords, but of breath, and patience, and endurance. Day by day, they wore down the rebel lines. Cut off their food, their water, their will. Rhodogun did not shout commands. She spoke softly, pointed quietly, trusted her commanders to act. And they did. Not out of fear, not out of ambition, but out of something rarer, belief. Nights were cold. Fires were few. The soldiers wrapped themselves in coarse blankets and in her silence. For she spoke less as the siege wore on. Her presence did the speaking. Once, a young recruit asked if the vow still held meaning now that victory was close. She looked at him, not harshly, not proudly, and said, "A vow keeps meaning until it's washed away." He never asked again. When the fortress finally cracked, not in fire, but in surrender, there were no horns, no cheers, only a long silence, as the gates creaked open and the rebels emerged, not defeated, but hollow. Rhodogun walked through the open gate first. Alone. Her armor dulled by time, her hair a living scroll of all that had passed. No one challenged her. No one dared. Inside the fortress, the wind blew soft and high. A banner fell from a window like a leaf. A dog barked once, then vanished. The war was over, but it did not end with a roar. It ended with a breath. And as soldiers fanned out to secure the area, Rhodogun stood still. She did not speak. She closed her eyes and listened, not for voices, but for quiet. Because peace, in its first form, is always silence. And for the first time in months, she allowed herself to feel it. Not celebrate it. Not question it. Just feel it. And as the stars began to appear, shy and distant, the army of a kingdom stood watched not over a battlefield, but over a moment. A breath. A pause between chaos and calm. The rebellion had ended. But Rhodogun's vow had not yet. She turned away from the fortress, not as a warrior, not as a queen, but as someone who had carried a nation across her back, and began the long ride back home. The journey where knots would be untied, where rivers would rise to meet her, where silence would become water. The war was over. The rebellion scattered. Cities once held in defiance now stood quiet, their gates open, their walls marked by memory more than wounds. Rodogun rode alone at the front of the return column, not triumphant, not smiling, just steady. Still wrapped in silence. Still wrapped in a vow. Her hair fell behind her like a lion's mane made of iron and ash. Tangled. Heavy. Marked by months of wind and fire. It had grown with the war, absorbed its dust, its weight, its voices. Each knot a name. Each twist a road taken, a battle endured, a night spent beneath stars unsure whether they were watching hope or its end. But now, her oath was fulfilled. Every rebel city had bowed. Every soldier who once cursed her name had fallen silent. The vow had been carried to its final thread, and for the first time in what felt like lifetimes, she allowed herself to consider what came next. She could wash her hair. Not as vanity. Not as relief. But as ritual. According to accounts whispered in the decades that followed, she did not choose a palace or a temple. She did not choose gold basins or perfumed oils. No handmaidens. No attendants. She chose a river. A real one. Cold, winding, stubborn, like herself. The kind of river that ignored borders. That cut through stone and time without permission. They say she arrived at dawn. Mist curled along the banks like folded silk. Birds waited in silence. And the sky, pale and trembling, watched without breathing. Rodogun stood at the water's edge and removed her armor piece by piece. Each buckle creaked like history letting go. Each plate clanked against the earth like a memory set down. She stepped into the current barefoot, letting it rise slow and sure. Her reflection shimmered, not regal, not broken, just true. With fingers stiff from battle and frost, she reached back and touched the first knot. The river was quiet. She began to unravel. Slowly. Carefully. Strand by strand. It took hours. Maybe all morning. Maybe longer. No one timed her. No one interrupted. Because this was not just a washing. It was an unwriting. Of vows. Of war. Of every whispered fear that had clung to her shoulders. Some say she wept. Not from sorrow, but from release. Some say she sang, an old lullaby, learned before swords and duty. A song about figs, and spring, and someone long gone. Some say she spoke the names of her fallen, one by one, into the current. And some say nothing at all, because there are moments in history that defy storytelling. When her hair was clean, she rose. The sun had climbed. The mist had burned away. Her armor remained on the shore. But she did not put it back on. She wrapped herself in linen, in breath, in silence, and turned her back to the water, her footsteps soft in the grass. No crown. No speech. No monument. But the soldiers waiting by the tree line stood taller as she approached. Not to salute. Not to bow. To follow. And they did. Because she had done what none of them could, carry not just a kingdom, but its grief, its fire, its truth, back into peace. And for generations after, they would tell this story, not always with accuracy, not always with the same words, but always with the same reverence. The warrior queen who wore her vow like a storm, and washed it away in the river that still remembers her. The war was over, but peace is never immediate. It arrives like dew on morning grass, quiet, hesitant, almost unwilling. Rodogun, now unarmored and unbraided, returned not to a throne, but to a people. To a kingdom that had waited with bated breath to see what form she would take next. She did not ride with drums or banners. She entered the capital slowly, walking beside her horse rather than upon it. Her soldiers followed in silence, their heads bowed, their boots worn smooth from miles and years. Word had moved faster than her feet. By the time she reached the outer gates, the people had already begun to gather. They came not for spectacle, but for recognition. Bakers, farmers, scholars, mothers with babies clutched tight. They lined the road like riverbanks, eyes wide with something more than curiosity. Some bowed. Some did not. Some simply watched her pass and held their breath. They saw the woman who had held the kingdom steady, not with a crown, but with will. Not with speeches, but with a silence that endured longer than any blade. Rodogun did not wave. She did not weep. But she looked at each face, as if counting them, as if memorizing them. When she reached the royal court, the hush followed her like a second shadow. Courtiers stumbled over greetings. Scribes raced to sharpen their quills. Ministers glanced at one another, unsure whether to treat her as ruler or relic. There was no clear place for someone like her. A woman who had commanded armies. A woman who had made oaths and kept them. A woman who had stood taller than war, and now walked barefoot on palace stone. The scholars argued. Should she be drawn with wild hair and fierce eyes? Or reborn and radiant, glowing in peace? Artists sketched from memory and imagination. One drew her wrapped in wind. Another placed her beside a lion. One simply drew a river. The truth, of course, was quieter than all of them. Rodogun accepted no titles. She made no demands. She sat in the corner of the council chamber, listening. When they asked her opinion, she answered plainly. When they didn't, she said nothing. She welcomed those who had once opposed her, not warmly, but with calm. To those who repented, she offered the weight of forgiveness, not as a gift, but as a stone placed gently in their hand. Carry it, she told one. Know what it means to return. And they did. She visited markets not with guards, but alone. Walked among the people not to be seen, but to see. Sometimes she laughed. Sometimes she sat in the shade with old women and listened to stories that had nothing to do with war. She did not marry. Not because of duty, but because she had already made the deepest vow one could make, and it had shaped her more than any lover could. Nights were quiet in the palace now. No footsteps in fear. No flames of rebellion outside the walls. And sometimes, in the courtyard, you could hear the sound of her comb moving through clean, loose hair, soft as the hush of a page turning. And that, too, became legend. Not the war. Not the vow. But the return. The woman who walked back into peace, and stayed. Time does not end stories. It only softens their edges. Rodogun did not vanish. She simply stepped away, from command, from counsel, from the shifting tides of politics. Her name, once carried on every breath of the realm, became something quieter. Not forgotten, just less spoken. But legends, the real ones, do not rely on repetition. They live not in the tongue, but in the thread of memory. She challenged the shape of rule, not by raising her voice, but by standing unmoved. She had shown that might did not belong solely in masculine hands. That leadership could arrive on horseback with tangled hair and return not crown, but calm. In her silence she proved more than force. She proved endurance. She stayed in the capital, but not in its heart. Her rooms were modest, overlooking a garden, not a square, filled with scrolls, not statues. She tended herbs, wrote letters in a script no one dared to imitate, and walked, always at dawn, as if greeting the day before the world noticed. She did not seek monuments, but one was built, quietly, years later, a simple stone pillar in a village where her army had once camped. It bore no title, just a carved braid, windblown. children asked who she was. Elders told pieces, some true, some not. She made a vow, they'd say. She kept it. She carried her people without asking to be carried. She returned from war. And stayed kind. That was the magic of her legend. Not the war, not the hair, not the vow, but the return to stillness. As seasons passed, she grew older. Her steps slower, but not unsure. Her hair, now untangled, silvered at the ends, was still long, still strong. Visitors came, now and then. Young rulers, daughters of noble houses, soldiers who had once served under her and now wore the creases of age. They asked for advice. She offered tea. One asked, "When did you know you were finished with war?" She answered, "When I no longer dreamt of it." Another asked, "What should I do with fear?" She smiled. "Use it. Just don't let it use you." And when a poet asked for her final words, she replied, "Why hurry?" The world changed around her. New treaties, new disputes, new kings. But Rodogun remained like a mountain no longer climbed, simply present. And that presence meant something. It reminded people that glory was not always noise. Some nights she would sit by the brazier and comb her hair slowly, like starlight falling down her back. A servant once said that in those moments, the room seemed to hold its breath. And when the day finally came, gentle, without warning, the bells did not toll. They whispered. The wind moved through the garden like a hand across silk. Her bed undisturbed. Her braid unbroken. There was no grand ceremony. No declarations. Only a river nearby, where people gathered and dipped their fingers into the current. Some cried. Some laughed. Some stayed silent. But all of them felt it, that weightless pull of a life kept, not chased. And as twilight fell on the city she had once carried through fire and silence, someone lit a single lamp and placed it near her window. It flickered long into the night. And the wind, soft and sure, carried her name one last time. Rodogun. There are many ways to rule. Some build walls and throw coins. Others raise armies and burn bridges. But Rodogun, she walked barefoot onto stone floors, and people followed not because they were told, but because they had seen. They had seen her in storm, in silence, in shadow. And when the time came to speak of her legacy, they did not begin with titles. They began with gestures. With how she stood, not above them, but beside them. With how she endured, not to impress, but to protect. In an empire where women were often asked to wait behind silk curtains while men decided the shape of the world, Rodogun tore down the curtain, not with fire, but with presence. She marched barefoot through snow and ash, held a helmet in one hand, and stillness in the other. She didn't beg for command. She didn't inherit it like a bracelet passed between generations. She took it, with clarity, with weight. And the empire? It didn't collapse. It followed. But the greater shift wasn't in the throne rooms or battlefields. It was in the kitchens, in the schools, in the quiet corners of marketplaces, where mothers whispered her name to their daughters, not as myth, but as model. She taught without teaching. She ruled without ruling. What her people learned could not be written in stone. That loyalty does not bloom from fear. It grows from seeing your leader suffer. Seeing her bleed, yet rise again. Seeing her hold a vow not like a banner, but like a burden she refused to drop. There were no more statues raised after her death. But somehow, they weren't needed. Her story lived in small rituals, in women braiding their hair not for beauty, but for remembrance. In young girls touching river water with reverence, not knowing why, but feeling something stir beneath the surface. Even the soldiers, grizzled, scarred, when asked about the war, would not speak of tactics. They spoke of the day she walked into their camp in silence, and asked for no one's permission. They spoke of her hands, steady, blistered. Of her eyes, tired, but never afraid. Rodogun had become more than a queen. She had become a kind of permission. Permission to lead without shouting. Permission to hurt without hiding. Permission to win without becoming cruel. Years later, a general would write in his personal scroll, "She reminded me what command could be. Not a sword, not a throne. But a quiet fire that warms, not burns." And still later, a girl, barefoot, with hair bound in thick braids, would step into the city gates, holding her mother's hand. She would look up at the old stone tower where Rodogun once stood. And she would whisper, not a prayer, but a promise. "I remember." And that was enough. Because legacies, the real ones, do not need to be shouted from temples. They live in voices spoken softly, across time. And Rodogun's? It still walks. In dust. In dusk. In dreams. Her name was Tamius. In the scrolls of empire, she was labeled concisely, warrior, negotiator, rebel, queen. But among those who walked beside her, she was far more. She was flame and frost. She was silence sharpened into strategy. She was the whisper of Rodogun's memory, stirred again by the winds of change. Tamius did not inherit power. She carved it, slowly, steadily, with each sleepless night and every calculated breath. She wore no jewels. Her crown was calloused hands, her cloak the dust of roads crossed with soldiers, emissaries, and storms. She rose in a time where women were expected to remain still, but she walked. She rose in a time when they were told to bow, but she stood. She met kings not with curtsy, but eye to eye. And when they looked away first, the room shifted in her favor. They called her many things: Shahut, Lady of Steel, the steps checkmate. But beneath all that noise, she remained Tamius, the woman who had once watched her mother plow the cracked soil of the lowlands, who had learned diplomacy before she could write, who had buried more friends than enemies, and still dared to lead. Her strength came not from conquest alone, but from balance. For every blade she raised, she offered peace first. For every city she approached, she sent a letter before sending horses. And for every alliance she built, she asked not for loyalty, but for trust. But power, especially for a woman who does not apologize for holding it, comes with cost. There were rumors. Whispers curled like smoke through the court. That she used poison. That she cursed her enemies. That no man who touched her could sleep soundly again. She did nothing to confirm or deny. Because power, she knew, was not simply earned. It was survived. And she survived by walking ahead of it. Always one step. Always alone. There came a moment, as it always does in these stories, when a larger force rose, a neighboring empire, vast and arrogant, led by those who did not know her and did not wish to. They sent messengers to demand submission. They sent threats carved into gold. They offered trade, wrapped in chains. She sent back only silence. Then she mounted her horse and rode. No army yet. No drums. Only her. People watched. Some in fear. Some in awe. All holding their breath. Tamius had no desire to be remembered as another warrior queen who burned brightly and vanished. She wanted to shape the outcome, not just survive it. So she did not ride to war. She rode to negotiate. And when the enemy emissaries saw her approaching alone, clad not in silk but in bronze and leather, dust in her hair, and fire in her voice, they hesitated. And in that hesitation she won her first battle. Not with blood, but with presence. It would not be the last. The men in court laughed when they heard she rejected the marriage proposal. They called her prideful, arrogant. They said Tamias does not know her place. But she knew it well. It was not beside a throne she did not build, nor beneath a crown she did not choose. It was on the edge of the Araxes River, where stone met soil and her voice carried farther than any army's banner. She had sent her warning, not in blood, not in blade, but in words. Firm, clear, final. Cross this river, she said, and it will remember your name longer than your empire ever will. But Cyrus, ruler of the greatest empire of the known world, did not listen. He had conquered kingdoms without lifting his sword. He had turned walls into ash with nothing but gold and promises. He believed her lands were wild, her people disorganized, her rule temporary. He saw no cities worth burning, no horses worth fearing, no queen worth respecting. So he built a bridge of boats lashed together across the Araxes, 1,000 men wide. He sent scouts ahead, confident. He marched with banners high, convinced. But he did not know what waited in the dust. Tamias had not been idle. She had studied the river, not just its width, but its memory. She knew the currents, the way it curled in late summer, the places where the stones whispered of betrayal. And she knew the people. She had no standing army, but she had loyalty. Fishermen, archers, riders who could vanish into the reeds, women who had taught their sons to string bows before they could write, elders who still remembered the names of every king who once dared to take this land, and failed. She did not gather them with orders. She stood by the river and simply waited. They came, some barefoot, some in armor held together with hope, some in silence. But they came. Cyrus crossed anyway. He stepped onto the woven bridge of boats, unaware that every plank beneath him groaned with warning, that every ripple in the water hummed a name not his. The attack did not come in daylight. Tamias waited for the wind to shift. When it did, her archers released flame. The river caught fire. The boats writhed like serpents. Men screamed. Some jumped. Some burned. Some vanished beneath the current with no trace but steam. And above it all, Tamias, watching, not triumphant, not cruel, just steady. When the fires died, the river was quiet again, but different, as if it had swallowed history. Cyrus was gone. Some say he fell by an arrow. Some say the river dragged him under. Others say he survived, ashamed, and never returned. But no one denied what happened next. The world listened. The empires rewrote their maps. And on the edges of every border, where kings once scoffed, they now whispered her name with caution. Tamias, the queen who burned the bridge before her enemy could claim it. There are battles that are fought for land. There are battles that are fought for pride. And then there are battles that are fought for something so personal, so soul-deep, that every breath becomes a blade. This was that kind of battle. Tamias did not fight for conquest. Not for borders. Not even for survival. She fought for her son. The one taken too early. The one who would never wear the tunic she had made for him. Who would never learn to braid his hair in the way her people did. Who had smiled once, just once, and then vanished in the war Cyrus had brought. No one knows the name of the field where she made her stand. No monument marks it. But those who lived remember the wind, the heat, the silence before she raised her arm. She wore no armor that day. Only woven cloth, soaked in river ash, tied at the waist like a promise. Her troops gathered not out of command, but out of fury. They were her people, farmers, archers, riders, but today they were something else. Her presence, still and searing, lit a fire beneath their ribs. It was not madness. It was purpose. Each of them knew this was not strategy. This was justice. When the time came, Tamias did not wait. She rode first, cutting through the tall grass like a blade through silk. No horn. No cry. Just hooves pounding rhythm into the earth. The Persians never expected it. They had rebuilt, or thought they had. Regrouped. Fortified their ranks. Convinced themselves that what happened at the river had been a fluke, not a reckoning. But a reckoning was exactly what arrived. Tamias struck their lines not like thunder, but like wildfire. Controlled. Consuming. Relentless. She did not command from behind. She fought among them. Her spear moved not in choreography, but in grief. Each strike an echo of a lullaby unfinished. Each parry a defiance of death itself. Cyrus's line broke. Not from numbers. From belief. His troops, once proud, saw her and knew they were not facing a queen. They were facing a mother. A force that does not retreat. That does not forgive. That rises again and again, not because it is fearless, but because it has already lost what mattered most. The Persians fled. Some dropped their shields and ran into the grasslands, never to be seen again. Others fell where they stood, eyes wide not with terror, but with recognition. This was not vengeance. It was remembrance. Tamias stood among the aftermath as the sun began to sink. Her hands bloodied, her clothes torn, but her spine unbent. She looked across the field, at the silence now filling the space where war had roared, and for a moment she breathed. Just once. Then she knelt and placed a small carved token, worn smooth by her fingers, into the soil. Her son's name was never spoken aloud in scrolls. But in that moment, every blade of grass whispered it. And in every generation that followed, when mothers told stories to their children beside the fire, they spoke of a woman who did not conquer kingdoms, but carved space in the world with grief made sacred. They spoke of Tamias, the storm who never asked to rise, but rose anyway. They carved her story in whispers, not marble. No grand temple bore her face. No city renamed in her honor. And yet Tamias did not vanish. She became something harder to erase. She became myth that breathes. A symbol, yes, of strength, of fire, of refusal. But more than that, she became a reminder that some queens are not born beneath silk canopies, but beneath storms. That not every crown is placed by hand. Some are forged in grief and resistance, and worn not for glory, but for protection. What we know of Tamias does not come from official records. The empires she faced did not celebrate her. They feared her. They rewrote scrolls to soften her name, to shrink her victories. They cast doubt, called her savage, called her lucky. But none of it erased her. Because her story passed through kitchens, not courts. Through songs, not speeches. In the steppe villages, mothers would tie their daughters' hair in braids and whisper, "This is how she wore it when she faced an emperor." In hidden places of learning, girls would draw her likeness in margins, placing her beside stars and wolves and flame. Tamias did not ask to be remembered. But she was. Because she had dared to change history. Not through conquest, but through the act of survival. Through the decision to ride instead of kneel. Through the vow that grief would not silence her, but shape her. She was not born into a throne. She carved one from stone, an expectation and fire. And for one brief, unforgettable era, the world stopped watching men. It watched her. The steppe queen who sent an empire into retreat. The mother who carried war in her heart and peace in her silence. The woman who never asked for permission to lead, because the land had already chosen her. Centuries later, a fragment of pottery was found buried in the ruins of a forgotten outpost. It bore no inscription. Just the curve of a woman's eye, drawn with care, and the faint outline of wind in her hair. Scholars argued over its meaning. But in the end, a single old shepherd, passing by the excavation, glanced at the shard and said, "Ah, she still watches. Because some queens rule once, and others rule forever, in fire, in wind, in legend." Tamias was the second kind. And the hoofbeats of her story? They still echo. Not in marble, but in memory. Long before the scrolls dried, before statues were lifted, before temples etched names into their stone ribs, there were stories. And these stories didn't sleep in libraries. They galloped across open fields, through smoke and firelight, through lullabies hummed around embers. They moved like breath between generations. The tale of Tamias was not singular. She was born from a people who had known how to ride before they knew how to write. The Masajte, one of many tribes who made their home across the rolling, untamed lands between the Caspian Sea and the mountains that whispered to China. Their cousins were the Saka, the Dahi, the Scythians. All masters of the bow and the saddle. All winds that no empire could truly grasp. To outsiders, they were chaos on horseback, unpredictable, untamed. To each other, they were kin. Blood-tied, song-bound, carried together by stars and hoofbeats. They knew no walls, only horizon. Their camps moved with the seasons, with the grazing of horses, with the signs from sky and soil. Children learned to ride before they could walk straight. Women trained not behind curtains, but beside their brothers. They fought. They hunted. They ruled. This was the world that shaped Tamias. Not courts. Not marble. But the steppe, where the earth cracked dry in summer and froze solid in winter. Where every shadow on the plain might be a caravan, or a threat. Where to survive was to know silence as well as thunder. Here stories did not need paper. They traveled mouth to mouth, from grandmother to child, from fire pit to battlefield. A history braided into hair, sewn into tunics, traced in the dust behind a galloping horse. And in these stories, Tamias was more than queen. She was the rider who never turned. The woman who, even when grief unmade her, kept going. She was not the first to rise among her people. And she would not be the last. But she became a thread, the kind that holds a whole tapestry together when it threatens to fray. In time, other queens would come. Other warriors. Some louder. Some bloodier. But none with her silence. None with her vow. And still, her story traveled. Not in gold, but in rhythm. In every horse that broke into open gallop. In every girl who gripped a bough for the first time. In every fire lit without fear. And the Masajte? They did not last forever. No tribe does. Empires push. Borders shift. But songs remain. And when, many years later, a Roman envoy crossed the eastern plains and asked an elder woman, bent with time but sharp with memory, who ruled these wild lands before cities came, she pointed toward the wind, and said, "She does. Tamias. The one who turned the river into fire. The one who taught us not to bow, even when broken. The one who still rides, just beyond the edge of history." Time, like the steppe, moves without end. What began as whispers around a fire, what galloped across centuries without need of ink, eventually found its way to pen and page. By the 19th and 20th centuries, Tamias had returned, this time not on horseback, but in books, on stages, in songs pressed onto vinyl and carved into national memory. The revival was theatrical, yes, but also political. In the young nations of Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Turkmenistan, scholars and poets began to look back, to trace the soil beneath their feet not just to empire and revolution, but to something older, something wilder, something powerful. they found her. A woman who did not simply survive in a man's world, she shaped it. Not with cruelty, but with clarity. Not with demand, but with decision. To students, she became a symbol, proof that leadership could wear braids and carry silence. To teachers, she was heritage incarnate. To dreamers, she was wind reborn. Her face, once sketched in ash and remembered in rhythm, was now cast in bronze in school courtyards, printed on postage stamps, written into curricula. She became not just the past, but a direction. The image of Tamias stood against Soviet narratives that sought to flatten culture, to rewrite strength as uniformity. Her presence resisted that flattening. She reminded people that their roots reached deeper than red banners, deeper than borders drawn by distant pens. And for women, especially the women of Central Asia, she became more than history. She became permission. To lead. To fight. To mourn loudly or quietly or not at all. To choose stillness not as surrender, but as strength. Plays were written. Novels imagined her inner thoughts. Her letters, real or fictional, became centerpieces in classrooms. One sculpture, cast in golden light, showed her walking barefoot toward an unseen horizon, wind tugging her cloak back, but her face calm, resolute. But even as she was celebrated, she remained, somehow, untouchable. Because true myth resists full translation. It lingers just beyond certainty, like the edge of a dream remembered at dawn. Even now, no scholar can agree on the exact details of her life. The river she burned, the child she mourned, the crown she never wore. But no one doubts the shape she carved in time. A shape that still guides footsteps, still braids courage into silence, still rides far off, just beyond the next hill. Perhaps, somewhere in the world right now, a girl stands beneath an open sky. Perhaps she has just been told she cannot lead, cannot speak, cannot stand taller than her station. Perhaps she closes her eyes and remembers that once, long ago, a queen made from ash and wind refused to kneel. And the world changed. Not all at once, but enough. Just enough.